Roxy, as of this recording, we're 25 days from the election.
Whew.
How we feeling?
I think the major word that comes to mind is just exhausted. I am exhausted. And I would really love to just crawl under my covers for a while.
I feel a little bit resigned.
Yeah.
And I feel like I should be less resigned. It's not that I don't care, but I just don't have the bandwidth to put all of my emotional eggs in the election basket.
I don't know. We all cared a lot in 2020.
We all cared so much.
Even though the stakes are kind of the same. I mean, it's almost the same election, but for some reason we're all sort of like,
Well, on that energetic note, let's talk about politics.
Clearly, it's what we want to talk about.
Can you tell? From Religion News Service, this is Saved by the City, the podcast from two Christian women dodging political brouhahas left and right. I'm Katelyn Beatty.
And I'm Roxy Stone. And I'm pretty sure I made that joke last season.
I'm pretty sure you did, but it was a good one.
I'm Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch. This week on The State of Belief, Strengthening Interfaith Relations in a Post-October 7th World. I'll be with Rabbi Jill Jacobs, Rabbi Rory Pickernese, Reverend Fred Davey, and Professor Najiba Saeed.
What you teach about Muslims in your synagogue and what I teach about Jews in my mosque is far more important than what I say to you when we're together face to face.
The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Distributed by Religion News Service Podcasts and available on your favorite podcast app.
So yes, election season is almost over. I gotta say, yes, it's probably discouraging that we don't care as much as we did in 2020. Like, it really felt like something important was on the line 4 years ago. And also, I am glad that we are not in 2020 again, because that drove a lot of people to the point of mental breaks.
It was also the middle of the pandemic. It just made everything feel more high stakes.
Did we have more time to care?
We have more time to care. In 2020, I felt like everything was big. You know, it was. People were dying. There were protests in the streets. Like, it was fraught in every way. And I think we can just only expend that kind of energy for so long.
Yeah. We've talked about the negative effects of polarization in the local church, in families, and various relationships. Since 2020, even before that, there's been so much relational breakdown and loss. And a lot of people just feel like, let's just avoid politics entirely to kind of not lose any more. Like, I want to hold on to the relationships I have, even if I really disagree with my family member or my friend. I don't want to go back to, like, fights at the dinner table or family reunions that feel really tense or conversations at coffee hour after the church service that feel weirdly heated.
There's some real triggers for you around church coffee hour, which come up regularly on this podcast. I feel like we really need to dig into that.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
The guy with bad breath at church coffee hour, the awkward conversations at church coffee hour, the political tensions at church coffee hour.
The PDA at church coffee hour?
Yes. See?
Well, how do you feel about church coffee hour?
Oh, ooh.
I can't be the only one.
I am not super good at church coffee hour, as I'm not super good in a lot of those situations where it's relational small talk.
Do you enjoy talking about politics since it's not small talk, since it's more like substantive?
I enjoy political conversations, but I don't enjoy political fighting. And I certainly don't enjoy like relational riffs around politics.
So I think we're wired a little bit differently around conflict.
Yes. Right. You enjoy it more than I do.
I don't know if that's right or wrong, but sometimes I enjoy the sparring. I think the more core feeling that I have is we should be able to talk about things that matter.
Right.
And so even though I do avoid bringing up certain hot topics around certain friends where I'm like, I know what they think about that and I think differently and I don't want to get into it. I kind of feel like avoiding the topic is not an ideal outcome.
No, I agree with you. It's something I appreciate about you. And I think that you have learned to speak your mind in a way that, I don't know, I think shows maturity and also some boundaries. You'll be like, no, that doesn't work for me. Or you'll be like, wait, I need you to tell me more about what it is that you think because I'm not sure I agree with you. Or, I think that you're totally willing to do that, which is great. I think I'm better than I used to be, but I don't love making people uncomfortable. And I start to get real like squeamish when there are arguments happening in my vicinity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I have observed and experienced that firsthand.
I totally feel like the Homer Simpson thing where I'm like, ooh, into the bushes.
backing into the bush.
Yeah.
But no, I have also seen you like with close friends where there's a lot of trust and rapport. I won't name names, but a certain politically tinged conversation came up in the hot tub at your bachelorette party. And that was like, you didn't shy away from challenging the person whose political take you disagreed with.
Was asinine.
See, I'm saying when something asinine happens, you have to kind of, push back.
That's true. But Katelyn, tell me, have you ever lost a friendship over political differences?
I don't think I have had a clear friend breakup over political differences. It's not like we had this one conversation and really got into it and realized the friendship was over. I have definitely had the experience, though, of trying to engage friends on political issues and leaving the conversation feeling really frustrated about their perspective and frustrated that I couldn't change their mind by the power of argument and feeling rightly or wrongly like, I don't feel as close to you. Like I'm disincentivized to lean into the relationship because I find your view on that thing really distasteful or unchristian or how could you think that?
Yeah.
A reasonable person wouldn't think that about topic X. And so I think in those situations, it's more just there's been some distance. I've definitely unfollowed people who were acquaintances or one-time friends over political stuff on the internet. Like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that. I wish I hadn't known that you think that.
Yeah, I've both unfollowed and continued to hate follow some of those people.
You're like, I gotta see what else they say.
I don't particularly advocate for this or say this is like a good thing, but sometimes it feels great to get self-righteously angry.
So I've heard. I've never experienced that, but I've heard it's a great feeling.
It's short-lived.
Yeah, it feels like it very quickly curdles into a general bitterness.
I do think there's something about social media and the way that you can follow and unfollow and curate that has sort of, at least for me, continued to increase the thickness of my bubble in the sense that it's very easy to start to sort people according to their beliefs because everybody, so many people are so vocal online. And to start to feel like believing differently than you is a little crazy or unchristian or I have very much felt what you felt, that sense that how could you possibly believe that? And I think some of that comes from two things, from mostly being around people like you and sorting into people like you so that anybody who believes outside of that seems kind of crazy, but also being online where everybody's saying the most extreme version of their thing. And you're like, it's all crazy. I think, nobody hasn't said this. This is not new at all, but just this way that being online has totally changed the political conversation.
In a way that then affects how you see people you actually know.
I think so.
On some kind of connection to. I will say, and we can talk about this too, like, to my knowledge, I do not have any close friends who I'm like fundamentally politically out of step with.
I don't either. I think I might have used to.
Do you think it's bad to end a friendship over political differences?
I mean, I do feel like for Christians, our politics get really wrapped up with our faith. And so then it starts to feel like misalignment isn't just about political differences, but about like these deep core spiritual differences or interpretations of our faith. And that part, that's where I think it ends up being more toxic in that way, when it becomes a real judgment on somebody's faith and their Christian ethic. Would you end a romantic relationship over political differences? I would.
Yes, I think some general political alignment is very helpful. I don't think it's going to happen on every single issue, but like there should be some overlapping circles, right?
Yeah, I think it would be hard. Like my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, my grandma was a Democrat and my grandpa was a Republican. And I remember thinking that was like cute.
Yeah.
I think I thought it was kind of normal, you know? And they would sometimes get into little sparring and then my grandpa would be like, no politics at the table. And my grandma would just keep going. She wanted to keep going, man. But that feels not sustainable in the same way today.
I mean, honestly, it would kind of be, I don't think I know any married couples where they're on different sides of the political aisle. At least if there are, they don't talk about it. I do feel like there might be something kind of refreshing to see, like people who love each other and disagree profoundly on certain issues. I do not want that for myself.
Yeah.
But I think it is workable for some people, and it's not inherently bad. It's just not what seems like something I could do.
I'm sure it happens to a lot of couples over time. Like they're maybe more on the same page when they get married and then they kind of like have different journeys and then and maybe end up in different places politically or at least on some issues and still make it work. It feels harder to choose that right at the beginning.
Some people really like conflict, like erotically.
Oh.
So if it works for you, who am I to...
Some political play.
Man, JD and Tim going on about NAFTA.
Oh, man. You know I love it when you talk childcare policies.
Oh, that's good. Well, I took this question through a very peer-reviewed scientific method, which means I took to Twitter, posted a poll.
About leaving romantic relationships?
No, sadly, although that would... I'm going to post that later, actually, just to get the juices flowing. I asked, do you think it's okay to end a friendship over politics? Yes, no, or depends. And then I asked if people selected depends, what does it depend on? So this really surprised me. About 29% said yes, it's okay to end a friendship over politics. 35% said no, which it just surprised me that more people said no than yes, because Twitter is a very politically hot place.
Oh, right.
And then another 35% said it depends. And there were dozens of responses. I think I had about 350 people participate, and then many responses from that.
That's a valid sample size, really.
Does RNS want to report on this?
Yeah,
on my
if you could
findings?
write it up.
So if I could summarize what people said it depended on, like this is the bridge too far. There were basically 3 types of answers or 3 types of it depends. And I came up with an acronym.
Wow, this is shaping up to be a sermon, a megachurch sermon.
Yes, CAN. CAN is the acronym. So C stands for conspiracy theories. Basically, like, if I have a friend who's delving into misinformation and...
asinine beliefs, you might say.
Yeah, like that feels like we are just operating in fundamentally different worlds. The A stands for, I don't think I can say this, but so I'm going to say ashholery.
Yeah.
It's not so much what someone thinks. It's more how they're going about engaging me on the topic. Like if they're belligerent and rude and pushy, or, you know, saying I'm not a Christian because I believe differently, that's going to break a friendship.
Yeah.
And then the N in CAN stands for Nazis. It seems like people were in general agreement, Nazi sympathies.
Yeah.
That's going to break a friendship. Like, I'm not going to be friends with a Nazi.
I'm editing a column right now on Satanist Nazis, which is a new breed of Nazi.
They're coming up with new breeds all the time. Beth Moore responded. Beth, of course, is a friend of the podcast. We had her on a couple years ago. She said, "No, I don't think it's okay, but I have found it sadly unavoidable in some relationships where one or the other can't accept the difference and continually tries to reason with or convince the other." It's kind of like, if you can't accept where I am and keep pushing.
Like that gets exhausting if every conversation is an apologetic session around their beliefs.
Right. Another woman, Michelle Van Loon, said, "If the other party thinks I am evil, deceived, or have trashed my faith, we may need to part ways, but I would rather have them make the decision to cut ties than me do it. Love hopes all things."
I get that, Michelle. Our guest today has lost more than a few friendships over politics, and she knows a thing or two about being maligned over her political views on a very public stage. And she's managed to find new friendships in the midst of losing old ones.
I just thought there were good people and bad people. The good people are Republicans. The bad people have D's by their name. It's pretty simple. So in 2016, when I decided to oppose Trump, all of a sudden, all those very bad people with D's by their name reached out.
Our conversation with Nancy French is coming up after we give a shout out to the organization that makes this all possible.
Religion News Service is an independent, award-winning source of global reporting on religion, spirituality, culture, and ethics.
For the best reporting on all the topics fit for polite company, like religion, politics, money, and Jerry Falwell Jr., visit religionnews.com. There was some headline about him today, and I was inspired.
When isn't there? Actually, there wasn't for a while, and that was nice.
Yeah, he's back. Yeah, he's back.
Caitlin, we have some new podcast love. Someone who preferred not to list their name said, "I have only been listening to this podcast for less than a year, but I can't express how at home it feels. Katelyn and Roxy managed to exude fun, respect, and honesty in all their conversations, and I have found myself learning and growing. I have listened to this podcast in vulnerable moments and felt safe. Thanks."
Aw, that's very sweet. Thanks for sharing that, whoever you are. Also, be sure to check out RNS's other podcasts, such as Complexified with Amanda Henderson, a podcast for the religiously curious and politically frustrated.
And of course, drop us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, or shoot us an email at sbtcpodcast@religionnews.com. We'd love to hear from you.
See the new feature documentary film, Blue Baby, October 9th. The documentary follows 8 boys through Father Edward J. Flanagan's Boys Town, a prison alternative in Omaha, Nebraska. Matters Media filmmakers gained unprecedented access to take the audience inside Boys Town to a world that challenges what people have believed about problem behavior for thousands of years. Blue Baby is a film that goes beyond the heart of a Catholic priest and into the real-world impact of what he created. See it October 9th and visit mattersmedia.org to experience this powerful documentary.
We're excited to have Nancy French on as an official guest this week. Many of you heard from her last week at our live episode. But Nancy, thank you so much for joining us today.
This is so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So your best-selling memoir, Ghosted, I first learned about from my mom, who got it from the library like the first week that it came out.
Aww.
And a lot of the book is spent describing how you and your husband, David French, were something of darlings in conservative circles until Donald Trump came along. And when you publicly spoke out against your concerns about Trump, many of your friends ghosted you. And so you've said, and I've heard many people say this, it's not that you had changed, it's that the world had changed around you. So was there a moment or a particular story when you knew that the world around you was changing in a really alarming way?
Yes. So, Katelyn, I have been a ghostwriter politically for many years. So I have lived with Sarah Palin in her house in Wasilla, Alaska. I have been on campaign buses. I've written for governors and senators and pundits. And I thought that I was the Republican whisperer. I thought that I knew exactly what all Republicans would say about any topic. You know, that was my job, but that's what I did every day. I just decided, okay, well, here's the topic, immigration. Here's what we say, X. And so when I was standing at church one Sunday morning, however, and I saw on Twitter, yes, I was checking Twitter during the coffee hour.
We would never do anything.
Nobody would ever do that during a sermon. But I saw that Donald Trump was mocking John McCain for being a prisoner of war. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not what Republicans do. And I thought, oh, my clients are going to be outraged at this. They're going to want me to write, denouncing Donald Trump's statements on John McCain. But it was quite the opposite. And when my clients were suggesting that I write something different than abject horror at what Donald Trump said about our American servicemen, I realized I had a problem.
Mm-hmm. In that moment, when you saw this, Republican frontrunner quickly becoming the darling of the GOP, do something that was very un-Republican. Like we do not publicly attack former military heroes. What was your response to that? Were you talking to other people about it? Were you spiraling? Like, what was the next step?
Well, I was actually read it aloud to the people at my church because I thought that they would be incredulous with me, but they were not. They laughed. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's something weird about this. This is the first time I've ever felt like there's something going on. So that evening when one of my clients in particular, was like, okay, we need to write about this. And I was like, okay, great. We need to denounce it, right? And he was like, I don't know. So this was the moment when I realized I had a problem. My clients didn't realize they had a problem, which was me, because stuff like this kept coming up. It wasn't just like Trump mocked the wounds of our disabled veteran heroes. It's not just that he did that and then became amazing and civil. It was like he continued to do it. So I just frequently was at odds with my clients, which my clients did not hire me to push back on them, because when you hire a ghostwriter, they're supposed to write what you say. Also, I'm a college dropout. I don't pretend to know stuff, but I have been to church my whole life. And so I knew that mocking disabled veterans was probably not the right way to go. So eventually I just felt convicted by the Holy Spirit that I was breaking the 10 Commandments by doing their bidding, because frequently it wasn't quite right. You sort of like squint your eyes and you say, okay, what I'm writing is truthish. But I just didn't think that God gave me my writing talents to make people drink their liberal tears. Also, I felt like I was mischaracterizing my liberal neighbors because frequently, like some Democrat in Topeka will do something asinine, and my clients and it's me. It wasn't, like I'm confessing here. I would write things like, well, this Democrat in Topeka did this stupid thing. That's how Democrats are. This is what Democratic ideology brings you.
Like take one random example and generalize everybody in the party.
Yeah. So super easy because it's lazy intellectually, but that's what I was doing. And I also thought it was immoral. So at that point, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And basically, when I decided not to mischaracterize my fellow Americans, I was unemployed.
And bring us up to speed a little bit, because that was 2015-ish.
Right.
What has the story been for you since then? Like if you are looking at today's election.
So my whole life I've been pro-life. I am pro-life. I have a Glock 43. Like I'm as conservative as you would ever want a human to be, probably more so. But I cannot be in a party that it celebrates and acquiesces to the whims of a confessed serial groper who has been held accountable in court for abuse, sexual abuse. In 1998, when we all were indignant over Bill Clinton's sexual predation, and we all said that character mattered in our leaders, I believed that, and I still believe that. So I feel like I haven't changed on these topics, and I feel like the rest of the Republican Party is gaslighting us, saying, oh, well, you got to come along and do this. But I always tell everybody that I'm too conservative to vote for Donald Trump. And so that is very confusing to people, because a lot of white evangelicals believe that, you know, what your obligation is to vote for the GOP. That's what I was taught my whole life. I believed it. I believed James Dobson and all of these people who, you know, said all this. But while we weren't looking, the Republican Party became pro-choice. The Republican Party became led by a person who's been held accountable in court for serious sexual predation. And when I say while we weren't looking, we were looking because this is what we prefer. This is what the Republican Party chose. We had options that were not Donald Trump, and we chose not to do that. So in my opinion, I think this is a terrible state, because like in 2016, when it was between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I would always say, when you're choosing between two evils, choose neither. And I fully believed that both of those were evil options, because Donald Trump goes without saying, you know, like what we've experienced. But Hillary Clinton she should have been in jail. She's a felon. And she's mocked sexual abuse victims too. You know, like if you ever remember like what she said about Paula Jones and others, the multiple other credible people that have come against her husband and accused him of sexual predation. She's just mocked those people too. So she was not a friend of women. So I chose neither in 2016. But when the insurrection happened, and the fact that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance refused to acknowledge that the last election was fair, I will never vote for an election denier. So I am voting for Kamala Harris. This is the first time I've said this publicly. I'm voting for Kamala Harris, and I'm doing it because I'm a conservative, and I want democracy to be preserved in this next election. And it is a shame that this is where we are.
Okay, let our listeners know. We were the first outlet to get the scoop. Yeah, and I mean, you know, you and your husband, David, are different people, but he also wrote about this very compellingly a few weeks ago in his Times column. You had mentioned in your previous time working as a ghostwriter that you were coaching a lot of your clients on how to kind of like take down the liberals.
That's right.
In that work, you describe yourself as contributing to the problem of polarization. So what has it looked like for you to kind of turn away from that? Not that anybody would walk away from this podcast thinking like she doesn't have convictions anymore, but like, what does it look like to be a person of deep conservative convictions and also try in this new season to be a bridge builder rather than a polarizer?
It's incredibly lonely and awful. I am saying it publicly because I feel like our democracy is on the line. There should be one party in America that's pro-life. The fact that Republicans are sticking their fist in the air and celebrating this person is just shocking to me. I feel like one of those old people sitting on the porch saying, what has happened to the neighborhood? But I haven't changed, and I want to continue to speak out, but it's very lonely. Nobody agrees with me. No one supports this. What happens is when I'm on a podcast like this and I say what I feel on my heart, I will get emails from people saying, thank you so much. I feel so lonely. This is exactly how I am also dealing with the election, but I can't say it. And I totally understand that. That's why I wrote my whole book. So the word ghosted is not just because I've been a political ghostwriter. It's because my communities, the communities that should have supported us, have turned their backs on us and accused us of a million things just because we're not towing the party line. And that's incredible, because when we stood on the stage at CPAC in 2012 and we were celebrated for being the best Republicans that have ever existed, I realize now that was all farce. They liked us because we were doing their bidding. We were attacking the right people. We were standing for the right things that they believed were right at the moment. But the second that we actually follow our convictions, we are as popular as head lice. We have never been invited back to CPAC. Not that I would go, sisters. But it's just like this thing. It's like my whole life I've been in this community that I thought accepted us because they loved us, but actually they loved what we were to them.
Mm-hmm.
You have preserved some friendships from that era. You still have a relationship with Bristol Palin, right?
Yeah.
What do you think has made those friendships more resilient to political divides?
Well, I just think it's important not to have politics as the main thing that is the defining characteristic of your relationship. When you have relationships that primarily deal on politics, they're usually sort of boring. It's not usually like Alex P. Keaton interacting with his family, you know, where it's like sort of funny and interesting. It's rarely like that, especially these days. But can you even imagine, what was the name of the show with Alex P. Keaton, Family Ties? Is that what it was? There was an old show where the kid, who is Michael J. Fox, was conservative and the parents
Family
were like
Ties.
Family Ties. Okay. And the parents were like hippies, aging hippies. And can you imagine that show being made now where you have liberal parents raising a conservative kid? Absolutely not. It would be flagged a million ways for traumatizing viewers because you just can't deal with it because we hate each other so much. You can't portray each other in a positive light or even a charitable light. But I have a lot of friends that I love. I mean, if I chose not to be friends with Republicans, I would be incredibly lonely. I live in Tennessee and I have my wonderful family. Many of them are voting for Trump. My wonderful friends, many of them are voting for Trump. But, you know, I'm not.
Do you think things are better in the local church? I mean, I have seen the headlines over the last several years that show that polarization is as prominent in American churches as any other institution. We sort ourselves by, like, I want to worship alongside people who think and vote just like I do. But I still want to believe that, like, there's even just a minority of Christians who believe and want to enact the belief that what we share in common from a transcendent perspective trumps, no pun intended, the things that divide us on earth. Like, let's kind of orient ourselves around the things that we all believe and share. Are things better in the church?
I think that Christians should, when they see acrimony and hostility and hatred and contempt in the culture, they should perk up and say, oh my gosh, this is my moment because I've got an antidote for this. It's called love, capital L, Jesus. And so Christians should perk up and run to the scene of the crime and say, hey guys, we don't have to be like this. You know, there's a better way. That's what we should do. But what we do instead is we do cheap memes, probably Russian created on our Facebook accounts.
Well, I don't do that.
Caitlin does this. I follow Caitlin, y'all. She's a horrific follow.
I love the Russian AI memes. Just like it's an art form.
No, but I think it's horrible in the local church. And I love the local church, but it's left me sort of feeling, politically, spiritually, almost even geographically homeless because like I went to the Presbyterian Church of America, the PCA church here in town, which is a wonderful church led by wonderful people. But every time I would walk in the door, people would come up to me and talk to me about things that they disagreed with me politically on, and even at the Lord's Supper table. And I was just like, sir, this is a Wendy's. Absolutely not. It's been a super lonely thing because I love church. I want to be the type of person who goes to church 3 times a week, like I did when I was a kid, and have this community and have this wonderful place of acceptance. But all of that has sort of been yanked, I think, from me. And I feel a lot of people are experiencing that same emotion.
Yeah, for sure.
On the flip side, have you made any unexpected friendships since your other community ghosted you? Have you become friends with people you maybe in another era never would have expected to?
Yes. My whole life, I've been so partisan. This is a confession, and I'm sorry to God and to everyone. I imbibed Rush Limbaugh talking points my entire life. And so I just thought there were good people and bad people. The good people are Republicans. The bad people have D's by their name. It's pretty simple. So in 2016, when I decided to oppose Trump, all of a sudden, all those very bad people with D's by their name reached out. After I wrote this article in 2016 in the Washington Post, this person named Kathy Kattenberg either sent me a message or made a comment saying something like, I support you, whatever. I don't know. It was something so mild, but the conservative response to me was so acrimonious and terrible that I decided just to follow people who showed me kindness. And we just forged a friendship. There was something so wonderful about talking to Kathy, with whom I politically disagree on like every topic. But over the course of everyday talking, we became friends. And I love Kathy Kattenberg. She's one of my favorite humans. And we've since been able to see each other in person. And this is many years later, and we're still very close friends. And I love her. And so that's one example of reaching across the political aisle and discovering that kindness can be found just, in places that you don't normally expect it.
We definitely want to hear more about the after party, which is the curriculum and other resources that you developed alongside your husband, Curtis Chang, Russell Moore. You shared a little bit about it on a panel at the RNS Symposium several weeks ago. But you are really trying to resource churches to address the very kinds of polarization we've been talking about. What kind of response have you gotten from churches or from evangelical communities?
Well, a lot of times you go to church and you learn about how to be a good Christian businessman or a good Christian mother, but you almost never hear about how to be a good Christian citizen. And I think people are just really relieved to be able to have teaching on this subject, because a lot of times you think, okay, to be a Christian in the political world or in the cultural world, you have to do the following things. Now, I'm sort of agnostic about the following things. I don't care exactly what people believe in their political opinions, but what I do care about is how they engage the culture. And so we know for sure that the Bible does not have, it doesn't say, okay, on immigration, this is exactly what you should believe, or this is what the marginal tax rate should be, or whatever. The Bible doesn't speak to that, but the Bible does have a lot to say about how we engage the culture. And so we do it with gentleness, and we care about justice, and we care about peace, and we care about things that are praiseworthy. And so the way that you treat other humans as you interact with them actually matters. So if you're saying something in a hateful, acrimonious way where you're showing contempt for your fellow Christian or fellow American, you might want to pause and think, okay, is this the right thing to do? But, in a lot of churches, being bold, quote unquote, politically is celebrated. They try to sort of rev you up into a certain moment. But anyway, the after party is not what to believe, but how to believe it and how to engage the culture. And we're not encouraging people not to be partisan, but rather to let the mind of Christ be at a higher level than their partisan mind.
Have any of your political beliefs shifted or changed over the last several years, especially when they find out you're voting for Harris? I'm sure a lot of your conservative colleagues call you liberal these days. But is there any truth to that? Has there been any shifts through this journey for you?
Yes, I have shifted. I don't think it's true that I'm a liberal, because liberals would not have me. I know that for sure. But I've pretty much stayed the same. I've had some, I think, realizations about police brutality. I understand that in a way that I didn't before. And I think that I spoke about that in an incorrect way. I understood that topic poorly. You just live long enough and you see things that change your mind. And so I hope in 10 years I'll change my mind on more stuff, because the beliefs that I have now are pretty much the beliefs that I've always had. But I've shifted a lot in my disposition and my love for people with whom I have political disagreements. I just have so much more compassion for everyone, including, Republicans. I love Republicans. Everybody I know is a Republican, but I also love Democrats. It's just weird. It doesn't feel like that should be a precursor to voting one way or the other, is to hate the other party. But honestly, this law of, group polarization, where you just become more and more one way if you're surrounded by people who are similar to you, and you start hating the other party, that's a real thing. And the fact that someone like me, I was somebody who owned the libs for so many years, I regret it. I was doing the wrong thing, because there's more that unites us than divides us.
Just the final question that's a little bit more personal. Before we started recording, you were telling me about your beautiful wig. And you are wearing it because you recently battled cancer. You have been officially cancer-free now for 3 months, it sounds like, which is just wonderful news and just like a wonderful outcome, you know, and also a cancer scare, a diagnosis and various treatments is a time that I imagine for you and for a lot of people helps to continue clarifying what you want to be spending your energies on. Can you say a little bit about how your experience facing cancer over the last year or so, how that has shaped you as well?
Yes, I don't exactly know how it has shaped me completely, but I was talking to producer Jonathan about this before we got on, and facing death is so unnerving and interesting and sort of electrifying. And the reason I say that is, have you ever heard of memento mori? It's a Latin phrase. I think it's memento mori tempus fugit is the full phrase, which is remember that you must die, for time is fleeing. And I feel like the idea of memento mori is so important for us to have. And you'll see memento mori icons and images in old art. For example, if you see an old painting of a king, frequently there's a skull on the table. And you're like, why is there a skull on the table? But it's usually depicted by flowers that are wilting, a skull, or a hourglass that's running out of time. And so you'll see that in art. This is an ancient sort of principle that I think it was first established by the Stoics. But there's something to it. So the idea is that you cannot fully live unless you're cognizant of your own mortality and your impending death. Yeah. And it sounds macabre, but I think it's important. And I think I've been given the gift of memento mori, which is remembering that I must die. I can't get out from under this feeling that death is so close. And the line between death and life is so malleable, and it's terrifying. And so, and I know that as Christians, we're not supposed to be afraid of death, but I think it's weird to say that you're not. When I get spiritually mature enough to not be afraid of death, I'll come on and explain how I did it. But currently, I feel sort of intimidated by it. But I feel like with death being so ever present, it clarifies the current situation so much, because in the time that we have is so precious, we're going to spend it mocking our fellow Americans for a former reality television star who appeared in pornographic movies. No, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do that for one hot second with the time that I have remaining.
You just provided like a contemporary memento mori. You just like painted a very vivid image.
I do want to get a tattoo. So my whole family wants to get a memento mori tattoo, which is traditionally the skull and crossbones. That's why everybody has it. People probably don't, are not completely aware of that. But I think that David French, Esquire of the New York Times, is going to get a memento mori tattoo with all of our family, except my youngest is too young. She's 16, so we won't afflict that on her. But everyone is willing and able, so we'll see. If we get them, we'll post.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's going to go viral. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Nancy.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks for having me on, ladies.
I could only think of one political issue that could hurt our friendship. Not end it, but I think maybe put a damper on it. And that is if you decided to wear a bucket hat. You had talked about almost buying one.
I came
that was
so close.
That was really upsetting to me.
Yeah, it was to John too.
So John and I are aligned in our fundamental core beliefs about the world, that the bucket hat does not need to ever come back.
It's back, okay?
It's just so back. Oh my gosh, what are we doing,
Hating
you
bucket
guys?
hats is chuggy.
That really hurt. I'm not going to lie. I don't feel heard.
I think an elder millennial choosing to wear a bucket hat might also be chuggy, so you're probably right on both counts.
Yeah, it feels like it's maybe trying a little hard.
Yeah. Saved by the City is a religion news service production. The producer is Jay Woodward, and the consulting editor is Paul O'Donnell. The editor is Julia Wyndham.
Chaz Rousseau put together our look, and Martin Fowler wrote our theme music.
We are Roxy Stone.
And Caitlin Beatty. Thanks for listening.
It's a sharp sword you have these days.
Gosh, Roxy, you're being really nice.